You weren't born, come to think of it.
Okay.
You know, Dr. Brunler was a very famous scientist, and he became interested in becoming a medical doctor because he was interested in healing with light and color. So he went to Sorbonne and qualified as a medical doctor in 1929. And then he started to work out color therapy with pure physics. You know, the color slides I showed you, you've had a color treatment, you know. And those things were all done by scientific angstrom units. About the middle of the 30s, 1930s, he heard about Monsieur Bovis over in France. And he had developed this little biometer that was 100 degrees long. Now, that's about 1/5 the size of this one. And it was also flat. I meant to have it out to show you today, but I won't take time to get it now.
Do you have one?
I have one. Anyway, Bovis was asked by the government of France to test food things like wine and butter and so on, as to whether or not they were rancid or up to par. They had to measure 100 degrees biometric. They wouldn't be good. So then somewhere along the line, Dr. Brunler never found out exactly how, but I think it had to do with some interest that Bovis had in reflexology. And instead of using the feet, he would use the hand. And he found that there were different areas on the hand here and on the fingers that could be measured. And they had to be, these were all in connection with organs of the body. And they all had to measure 100 degrees biometric. If they didn't, then there was something wrong. Now, he said the first finger was in relation to the heart. The middle finger, you said yesterday when we were talking that was the gonad figure.
Yeah, and also, I think lungs too. I don't know.
Well, he said, Bovis said it had to do with this was the liver in the first flange, second flange was the stomach, and the lower flange was the intestinal tract. And he put the probe on each one of those places to see if he could find something that didn't measure 100 degrees. And he said the little finger, fourth finger, is the kidney finger. He gave us an example that if he got from the tip of that kidney finger an 87 on the biometer, that meant that the kidney had a stone in it.
Oh.
And it was reversed. You know, it was right hand, left kidney.
Always the reverse side.
Right.
Because of the cortex there.
Right. So, but he said the little finger was the gonads. So,
The little one, yeah?
the little one. As far as he was concerned, that was in relation to the gonads. But he told Dr. Brunler that he had a strange thing happen with the tip of the thumb. He said, when I measure that, it goes way beyond 100. I have extended my biometer to 258. Sometimes it goes beyond that. So he said, Brunler spent about 4 or 5 days with him getting this instruction, using how to use the probe and so on. Anyway.
May I ask you a question?
Yes.
When he studied the fingers, that Dr.
Bovis.
Okay, and did he consider meridians, or he studied nothing to do with it?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It was very interesting about Bovis. There's a little bit of interest. He was a devout Catholic, and he was not at all open to reincarnation at all.
Oh.
Is it too soon to pour this?
That's okay, no.
Okay. So Dr. Brunler couldn't mention anything like of an esoteric nature with him, because he just blew him off, you know, he said. But anyway, Brunler spent about 4 or 5 days with him, bought a biometer and a pendulum from him. And
so that Catholic man was using pendulum and
he was using a pendulum. Well, in Europe, that's very well accepted, you know.
Yeah, everybody can embody.
And you know, also, the Vatican used an abbey. Abbé Mermont is his name, Mermont. And he used to do things for the Catholic Church to find things that were lost and
Like a
treasures.
dowser,
Yeah, he used it as a dowsing instrument. And they accepted it. I think that it's more acceptable in Europe and Britain than it is here. Anyway, he said to Brunler, he said, now, you're the scientist. If you find out which organ this is related to, he said, you can have the thumb. He said, the four fingers are mine. He said, this is what I have discovered. But he was trying to be French humorist, I guess, and say, the thumb could be yours, but the four fingers are mine. So Dr. Brunler took it back to his office, and he made a practice of always taking the measurement of every patient that he had. And sure enough, when he got to the thumb, he got all these particular, you know, curious kinds of reactions. And so he'd taken 300 radiations when a girl, a young woman, she actually was 23 years old, but she was very much like an imbecile. And she was brought by her father, and well, she was mentally, in Britain they call it mentally defective. We say mentally impaired. Anyway, she was brought to him, and he measured her fingers, and they all measured 100 degrees biometric, and he said, well, your daughter has very healthy organs. So then he measured the tip of her thumb, and it measured 118 degrees. Now that is the lowest that he had ever had. He'd had people in the upper hundreds and all the way up the scale, but he too had extended his scale. But he'd never had anything as low as 118. So he puzzled over that during his meditation time. And he suddenly said, I wonder if it has anything to do with intelligence. So he went to his files. Now in those days there were no computers. So he had things written on little cards, and he wrote everything out. So he put all these 300 cards out according to numbers. And he realized that there was something there that looked like an evolvement of something or another. So then he said, I wonder if it has anything to do with intelligence. And sure enough, the highest number was 438. And with that number, with that man, he could discuss anything. He could discuss esoteric things, metaphysical things, scientific things. He was a man that he could converse with very easily. So from then on, he started taking the biometer with him. Now he did this biometer with the resonance factor. He developed it like a violin. A violin is done with the resonance factor. So is a guitar, but mostly a violin, because that's the way it's cut. You know, that's this way, so that it can have more resonance and so on. So he used the same idea for the biometer. And he started putting silk and many different modalities within the box to make it more sensitive, because he was a scientist and he knew how to do it. And he realized that it must definitely be dielectric energy, because the only way you could pick it up was through a pendulum. And you have a dielectric energy is something that radiesthesia is brought into. It might be radionically or something of the sort. But for this, he needed this kind of energy. So he would carry the box with him, and he was a bachelor in those days and very much in demand for dinner parties. And he'd go to dinner parties carrying this biometer under his arm, this big thing, and he'd take everybody's measurement. And by this time, he had determined that it must have something to do with the brain. And then he went further into it, and he realized that it was the pia mater of the brain. The pia mater is the covering of the brain.
Is that about cerebrum?
Yeah, it's all over. The brain, this represents the brain. And it's the pia mater.
Like a layer of pea.
Yes, a layer, and that acts as a condenser. And that's what we get our measurement from. So we put...
Not the brain itself.
Not the brain, no. It comes from the pia mater of the brain. Now, he was, before he got the headpiece, did the headpiece, he would have people run their thumb across the scale like this. But it was much better to have the headpiece, because that way it encompassed the whole brain, the cavity, or of the brain itself. It's also important that the silk goes over the top of the head, because that acts as the condenser, definitely picks up the energy from the pia mater of the brain. So that was the story, briefly, of how this came about, and I think it's fascinating, because his discovery was, nobody had ever discovered anything like that. And so consequently, it's interesting to see how that worked out. Now, with that in mind, are there any questions?
No, one quick question is, you say that Dr. Brunler was born in Sorbonne?
Oh, no, he was born in Germany.
But the school he graduated medical in...
Sorbonne is France.
In France, okay. So he has a French medical degree.
Yes, his his chemical engineering degree was from London University. And then he qualified there in 1914 as a physicist and a chemical engineer. And he did a lot of inventions. He invented the process that makes our stainless steel able to be used commercially. And he sold that patent to Firth Steel in England. Then he also got the Bessemer Prize for his underwater flame, which burns under, it's like an acetylene torch that burns underwater. And it was used by the frogmen during the war to take care of ships that were, something had happened to them. Instead of having to take them into dry dock, they would be able to repair them that way. And they still use it. They use it to repair piers and so on. And it has his name, the Brunler flame. Now,
is there any book on him, or his life, or
that's what I'm working on.
Oh, wonderful.
And he wrote, I have several books of his memoirs, which are very interesting, and I will take more stories out of those as I get on with this book. Anyway, with that in mind, if there aren't any questions, I'd like to get started with this, because we have a lot to cover. Now, you